So we are recording our member meetup today from our for pivoting our programs to virtual. So we're recording, and the next part is we're going to ask you to use the chat function to introduce yourself and your organization. So it looks like everybody has access to the chat at the bottom of the screen. It is the arrow number 2. If you can just take a moment to share your name and your organization, we would love that. Awesome. We ask that you stay on mute when you're not speaking, and if you're calling in, ensure your video and audio are linked via participant ID. Feel free, we're going to ask you to go off mute when we go into the breakout sessions, but if you have questions in the meantime, feel free to chat them in via the chat box. We're monitoring that, and we'll be responding both one-on-one and as needed throughout the day. Awesome. Okay. Just as a pro tip, if you want to speak, you can press and hold the spacebar on your keyboard, temporarily unmute yourself, and you can toggle so you can share short responses. And then another thing is what kind of view you want to have. Speaker view is the button at the top right of your screen, and you can change that from gallery to speaker view depending on what your preference is for viewing. Awesome. Okay, so our next step is we're going to practice renaming ourselves. So as a way for us to engage with each other, especially when we're in breakouts, we need some shorthand for getting introduced. So if you haven't renamed yourself before, there are 2 ways to do it. You can click on your picture and right click, or you can click the 3 dots. Either way, that'll bring up a drop-down menu where you can click rename. We're going to ask you to enter your first name, your pronouns, and your organization. And I'm going to do that with y'all. Awesome. If anybody's having any trouble getting the renaming to work or anything like that, let us know. Otherwise, we'll move on. Awesome. So our goals for today, we really, as we were coming together to talk about this, we really took a minute to reflect that things are constantly changing. This is a learning environment if ever there was, and things are evolving really quickly. So today we're bringing everyone together. We see this as the beginning of an initial conversation, and if themes rise from this that we think we need to dig into further, we will absolutely plan another event as a follow-up. So today we're going to hold space. We're going to create spaces for us to share and learn from each other, and we're going to kind of identify some things about what we're experiencing and collaborate together to brainstorm some resources. So our 3 offerings are going to be identifying some shared pain points from pivoting, sharing insights and resources that you've used during this time. We know that there's a lot of wisdom in this room. We know that we're almost 4 months into this pandemic now. Man, we have learned a lot in 4 months. So we want to make sure we harness and acknowledge that. And then we want to view all of our offerings through an equity and think about how we're acknowledging inequities and where we're acknowledging opportunities to advance equity in these times. So 3 main goals to kind of view through the lens. And the way we'll do that is, next slide we can go to has our agenda. We did our welcomes, our goals, and our Zoom norms for today. We're going to hear from our 3 of our MC facilitators. They're going to model a discussion that then you will have in your first breakout session. This is a 2-hour session, so we're giving you a break. So there'll be time to go to the bathroom, get a snack, hydrate, highly recommend. Then we'll come back into our second breakout session, and we'll talk about brainstorming ideas and resources and things like that. We'll have a share out from that session where we'll kind of talk about some of the discoveries that we've had, and then we'll close and discuss next steps, give you a chance to give feedback, and set our sights on what we can do to support you in the future. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to start us with our panel discussion. So Robin Llewellyn from Learning and Leadership, Caitlin from Consulting, and Rita from our Data and Research Data Ecosystem work. I'm going to ask y'all to take yourselves off mute and then share with me in 1 word, what did you feel when you realized that everything needed to go virtual?
Okay,
adapt.
I'm gonna start and I'm gonna cheat. I'm sorry, Rita. I didn't mean to speak over you. I'm starting and I'm cheating because this is it. This is it. When I had learned that everything was good, this is me, a deer in the headlights. That was it. I know that's not one word, but that was it.
I think that conveys an emotion. Absolutely. Rita, what can you do?
Opportunity, partly because of my experience working remote a lot in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Scary. So I'm going to cheat and use 2 words, but opportunity too.
Absolutely.
And for me, nervous. I think I had 2 staff meetings I was supposed to facilitate with over 50 folks. And I was like, how am I going to do this virtually? And just really nervous about what that might look like.
Absolutely. Well, what have been some themes that you've seen of issues or pain points that you've seen in the pivot to the virtual work that you do?
I can share a little bit. I think for me, something that I've learned is that I can do a lot of research around what might be best practices in pivoting to virtual, but really understanding who I'm working with and what the needs are of different organizations as you're pivoting to virtual is just as important as like best practices. So I've had some interesting lessons learned just knowing different staff's cultures and teams' preferences around how they use tools digitally.
And what I continue to learn is the sensitivity around scheduling. You know, it's not as simple as just saying, I checked your calendar, let's meet or do something, because people are having to do things like make sure kids get snacks or make sure the dog gets out. And so you don't put that on your calendar. And so you have to add more of a personal connection or touch.
Absolutely.
I think for me, some of the biggest challenges have been my work style, like trying to make sure I'm not pushing technology or timelines that match me as the designer of the experience versus the folks that I'm serving through my work. I think that's been a challenge for me. And then I think the other thing that's popped up consistently in collaboration events or activities and consulting that I've done is the different platforms and asking for and trying to figure out what can work when people come on sometimes 3 different platforms or especially hardware to interact with whatever I'm doing, whether it's a phone for some versus a computer for others in the same meeting, and some people cannot join video, some people can. The flexibility of that, in addition to the literal constraints, I think, because some people can opt in to interact in different ways too. It's not just a restriction because of access. So it's both, and trying to balance both of those
Absolutely.
is the challenge.
I am discovered that I personally had to let go of what I knew worked in an in-person facilitation, and instead of trying to revamp what I loved and was comfortable with or new work, I really just had to let it go and not try to move it over, but to really work on creating something that was unique and different for the environment. So that was part of the pain points at the beginning. And then I am a lifelong learner, and I do love to learn. And it was really hard for me to also accept that I was going to start doing this without knowing everything, which meant I was going to make some mistakes. I was going to try something that wasn't going to be successful. And then I was going to learn from that and keep working on it. So just giving imperfection and embrace and grace to explore and try, and to both Caitlin and Rita's point, really recognizing that it wasn't about me, it was about who was going to be viewing and participating and experiencing it, and thinking it into that mindset. which was, it was a really, it was really good learning, painful outside of the comfort zone experience for me. So yeah.
Yeah, and what I like about all of your themes and Brenda's point, like it's really thinking about who we are as people and how we can come to a space. So I really like that kind of, we're going to try it when we're not ready, but when we center the people that we're serving and who we're connecting with, that really helps us kind of build on that. I love that. So I'm going to shift a little bit. Where have you seen inequities show up in the virtual environment? I would say inequities showing up, but also where have you seen opportunities to advance equity in the virtual environment? How have you seen that impacted in your work?
I think for me, I mean, to Brenda's point, I've definitely seen kind of what I mentioned earlier, different platforms that people approach the work on, and having to adapt to that and support that, not always being able to support that. And then also the space that people are within, that personal space, to Brenda's point, where it's just different. And we're here, we're humans, and we've got all kinds of things going on in our lives. They're influencing our how we can interact with something during the day. And so for me, that has related a lot to timing and how I can work with our clients. And if, like, for instance, there's been a scenario where someone's asking for an example. Sure, I can give one. And there was a project I was working on for a little while, and one of the key stakeholders that we who could really inform and was a key person in a program, supporting services and receiving services. I couldn't just, because that person and that group of people involved, a lot of them had young children, I couldn't set a specific time that we would for sure be able to tackle a challenge together virtually. But what was interesting is because they did have the access to be able to join virtually, I was able to adjust my schedule, and we had a 3-hour window, and we just jumped in and out of the meeting when we could. It meant I had to restructure what we were doing quite a bit to make sure that there was true inclusion during that activity, so that the other person was empowered to share what they needed to during that time, and I wasn't cutting them off artificially with being time bound and bound to having to work virtually. So it was hard to figure out how to do that, but I just had to change my schedule to work other things in, because I knew, okay, about a 3-hour block, we're probably going to get about 30 to 45 minutes of work done for this project, but I need to schedule all my other things that I have to do in that time, so that I can figure out how to bounce around. So I don't know if that's a clear enough example. So if it's not, let me know if you need another one, but that's the one that comes to mind first.
I can go. Technology is probably the biggest in terms of equity and just accessibility. I cannot tell you, internet is not always available, and it goes out, and I don't know why. So just accessibility. I don't know the technology that people are. I'm trying my best to present something that people will be able to see and hear, and the end user experience is not one that I am aware of, and I know there's inequities there. I know it happens, and I try to adjust. As Rita was saying, I've had people that haven't been able to make a call or a class, and it's in a series, and so I'll schedule a one-on-one call to follow up and give information. So there's accommodations and adjustments, but quite frankly, the inequity I think that most concerns me is most of the time I am not even aware of what I could or should be doing to make the experience more equitable. So
yeah. putting yourself in that learning frame again. Absolutely.
A few of the things that I've seen show up when working with clients is different types of hardware across organizations. So people using phones to access meetings, or a laptop without a camera. I've done a few where you have a few people using one similar device in the same shared space for groups that are still working in person. And so just how do you adapt your programming to meet folks where they're at? And then kind of the other thing that I think is really interesting and has been showing up that Rita mentioned is just we're working in our homes sometimes. And if you're a caregiver, what that looks like, having children in the background, or even having children on calls, is just interesting as well. And that makes it really hard to focus, and shows up in how people are able to engage in facilitations and meetings as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Rita, Caitlin, I don't know, but sometimes I think in the Zoom experience, when we are bringing something forward, there's a greater intensity in the Zoom experience that I think that we really have to be aware of. And one of the things that I have found that worked really well for me is to have what Mary often is on a class with me, and she can do behind the scenes caregiving and explanations and support, so that I'm in the moment of facilitating, but then there is a secondary person that is taking care of needs and accommodating as much as we possibly can. So I think that works, but I would be interested in hearing other people's thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and we have a few minutes. I'd love if anybody has any questions, if they want to chat them or unmute themselves to ask, or anything that they'd add to this conversation. The next step is we're going to model this conversation within small groups. So you will have the same conversation and get a chance, an opportunity to meet and connect with some other nonprofit leaders as well. But while we're here in the main space, any questions or anything else you'd like to hear from these three?
Yeah, I'd like to add, in addition to knowing how we're pivoting and managing in the current environment, how many people are already trying to plan and think ahead about how do I, on a parallel path, think about what next when we go back? What will be different? How do I need to plan, etc.
Huge.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a little bit. And I don't know if I've planned anything at all. But so much of the work that Chelsea and I do is here at Mission Capital and internal work, and we have pivoted a lot of what we do to virtual sticky notes and all kinds of activities like that, trying to replicate our in-person activities. And I'm curious and don't know how, when we do go back, I suspect we'll be sticking with a lot of the virtual work because in order to be inclusive, because so many folks may not be able to be in the office as often, especially if they got kids that they're supporting at home or something like that. There's just lots of things that we'll probably have to continue finding an interesting balance between in-person and digital.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a lot of nonprofits and different organizations just make a statement and be clear about like the timeline for expectations for virtual versus in-person has been a big initiative. And I know that that's what we've done here at Mission Capital, is be clear that we aren't doing in-person through December 2021 for, no, I'm sorry, I've missed a year, through December 2020. So that's kind of helped us with some of our planning and being clear about that, but we also understand that's not going to be realistic for a lot of people. And so we've seen a lot of people get really clear with specific teams who are in-person client facing about what those expectations are and what those, accommodation paths. So tying it to timelines has been a really big part. Ramad, would you add anything? I know we recently tried to attempt to plan the rest of our year in programming, which was exciting.
Yeah, it is. And and having a timeline where we know what we're doing up until the end of this calendar year, but then also being deliberate and recognizing that it has been an opportunity to learn some stuff, and it has been an opportunity to really think outside the box. So what are we going to blend together? How can we make this even better by having both the connection in person as well as the support? Yeah, the thought of doing asynchronous and synchronous learning is like exciting, because we're opening all sorts of doors for our convenings. So planning, I think I would go dreaming at this point in time instead of actual planning. But definitely soon we are going to put pen to paper and get some really concrete things online. And it's exciting and full of opportunity. I have to say one more thing, and I know I'm talking too much. But one of the things that I've learned with the virtual experience, either for meetings, staff meetings, or convenings of any kind, is virtual is slower. Virtual takes more time. And that is one of the things that I am really trying to comprehend and really build into my presentations and my facilitations and meetings. It just takes more time, and I must be more patient and more deliberate on how I use time. So that's just a little tip.
My favorite thing about Zoom is when it tells me when I've muted myself, so that when I start talking, it reminds me. I was just going to say, Robin, I love that. And I think on that note of time, I think let's pivot to what we're going to do for the first half of the last half of this hour, but the first breakout sessions. Because our goal is really, again, for today, is to kind of convene wisdom in this space. And share out some best practices and lessons learned. So we're going to be moving into breakout rooms. Our fearless Mary is setting those up now. If you have not done a breakout room in Zoom yet, basically it's just like going into a small meeting space. It's like if you were in an office that you jump into a room with other people. This first breakout room is the opportunity to connect with other nonprofits, introduce yourself, introduce your organization, and then have a similar conversation to what you saw here with our Mission Capital facilitators. So asking yourselves different things about what's going on with you, what you're identifying as pain points, and then where you're seeing inequities show up in the work as well. So the breakout session, just a couple logistics first before we get into it. So your breakout room number will correspond, we're going to use, I need to go back to my script. My apologies. Okay, so to orient yourself when you go into your breakout room, at the bottom will be the chat feature and the help button. For the chat, you can only use this with other people in the room. It's a great place to take notes since it's only visible to those of you in the room. If you need to speak to one of us, that's where the help button will come in. So the button number 1, the arrow number 1, that kind of sends a wave to us and it enables us to go join your session to help out. We are also going to be using another platform during this. This is Jamboards. It's a Google product that is open to anyone and it's free with a Google account. So it's a great resource and tool for kind of convenings and collaborations. And this will provide a space to capture your ideas. Now, here's a trick. Since Jamboard only allows for 50 participants at once, and we're over that, there are going to be 2 Jamboards. So getting pasted in the chat right now are going to be Jamboards for breakouts 1 through 10 and Jamboards for breakouts 11 through 20. And I believe the link for the Jamboard also will be pasted. Yep. Awesome, into this. So what you're looking at on the screen now is what the Jamboard will look like when you get in there. It's almost kind of like a PowerPoint slide, but it's specific and for you to be able to collaborate. Your Jamboard, your Jamboard will have your correspond to your room number, and you will be assigned your breakout room number when Mary opens up the chats. She's not opening them up now because as soon as you click on them, then you go to the other room and you kind of disappear from this. So we're just going over the orientation. The breakout session will be 15 minutes, and the ideas that you generate in this session will be used in the second breakout after the break. What we mean by that is that there are 2 themes, a couple of navigations in your Jamboard first, sorry. You're going to navigate to your correct board. So based on which breakout you are, then it has different, oh, can we stay on the last one? Sorry. So if you're in breakout group 3, at the top of your Jamboard, it'll be Jamboard number 3. And it will say breakout room number 1, 2, or 3 on the left side of the Jamboard as well. You'll use stickies, so like sticky notes to note your items and topics for discussions that you come up with. So we're really using these as a place to record kind of what your discussions are like and give people insight into what you're experiencing and what questions and challenges you're having. Okay, next slide. So the breakout rooms themselves are going to be 15 minutes long, this first session. You're going to meet with 3 or 4 other people. Mary will place you into those groups, and you're going to discuss the 2 questions. Have there been of issues that you've seen in the pivot to virtual work that you do? And where have you seen inequity show up or be addressed in the virtual environment? So you're going to note themes, questions, insights, ahas. We usually suggest 1 reflection per sticky note, but this is your space. Each Jamboard has 2 sections for the 2 questions, but we're really excited to see what y'all come up with and what y'all share. You'll have 15 minutes, and I'll send some timing reminders as well. And again, you can signal us if you have any questions. But yeah, we're going to give you those 15 minutes. I'm entering into the chat right now the 2 questions that you're answering. And then, yeah, this is your time, 15 minutes to connect with each other and kind of have that discussion about what questions you're having. So Mary, when you're ready to open the breakout rooms.
Yep, 1 second.
Awesome. Any questions about breakout rooms?
I'll just add from a facilitation technique, using the Google Suites like shared Google Docs. Jamboards is a really helpful tool for collaborative brainstorming. And it also just ensures that everyone has access to all of the information that the group creates. So I find it to be a really helpful resource.
Yeah, and so I'm going to open the room now, and we're getting a lot of chats about how you know your room. So right when the rooms get open, it'll come up and it'll say join breakout room X, and that's going to be your room number. And then based off of that, like Chelsea said, that'll be your Jamboard link. So if you're asked to join room 6, you would use the Jamboard link that says breakouts 1 through 10, and then navigate to the right Jamboard for your breakout room. So if we're ready to get going, we'll send you off into breakouts, and we're here to help. So, all right, here we go.
You apparently had in the breakout sessions, the Jamboards were filled to the brim and very enlightening and interesting. We found a couple of themes during that discussion, a little bit around engagement of audience and user experience, internal operations, marketing, collaborating in a virtual environment, and technology access. And as you can see, we're still playing around with them, but that dialogue from all of those conversations and all those breakouts have been rolled into sort of breakout room 2 for us to archive and have access to. And you can see how all those conversations played with each other a little bit. So we're going to go into breakouts and get a little bit deeper into these topics that you're all rolled up. And Caitlin is going to talk about how the next breakouts are going to look.
Great, thanks, Matt. So we're going to move you into small breakouts based on these areas that you want to dig deeper on. So take a moment and look at this list under themes. So we have, it'll come back in a second, digital equity. I'm going to wait a second.
Right, I'm going to
change
some of these titles so that they match the Jamboard.
So as Min's prepping that, so you are going to be moved into a breakout room just to kind of dig deeper on these different topics. So a space for you to collaborate with others that want to dig deeper onto those specific issue areas. So the items that you can potentially kind of talk through are technology access, engagement of audience, user experience, marketing, internal operations, and collaborating in a virtual environment. So similar to how you renamed yourselves when you joined, we're going to ask everyone to rename themselves with the kind of group that you want to kind of work in. So I'm going to have Min share the next slide, which shows how you can change your name. And if you're like, wait, what are the groups? If you look in the chat, Matt's adding them, so they're there. So click on the kind of ellipses and then click rename for yourself. And for your name, change it to the group that you want to dig into. So I'm going to model, I'm going to change mine to collaborating in a virtual environment. So take a minute or two to think about what group you want to move into and then rename yourself with that group.
Can y'all say more about what you meant by user experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to pick on Rita because that's Rita's specialty, and she knows a better way to frame that. So Rita, do you mind sharing a little bit about what showed up in the stickies?
Absolutely. So I'm going to actually just go to the Jamboard where we have that grouped. So user experience is the experience someone has with whatever you've got. It could be a program, it could be a product, it could be a tool. It could be me literally interacting with my phone. It could be you sitting through this training and your experience with that. But it's usually individualized. So it's an individual experience of interacting with whatever it is that you're interacting with. So the Jamboard, your interaction with the Jamboard is one example. A virtual event, you're having the experience you have as an individual. That is an example. There are all kinds of things that go into UX, but in this case, we're being a little more targeted on that interaction piece and your experience of that. Does that help?
Yes. I think I'm confused with the difference between that and engagement of audiences.
And we talked about that during the breakout when we were trying to sort, actually. So it is one of the challenges of user experience is it is so broad. But I think personally, and if someone else from the MC team has a perspective on this, I think the audience engagement, some of the differences in the stickies, which it looks like Min is sharing right now, is audience engagement can include things like how do you reach your audience? How do you keep them moving towards a certain goal in an activity? That will include user experience, but it's just not quite as targeted. It's also about just truly engaging that group. Does that sound like enough of a difference? Anyone else from MC that wants to distinguish the two?
Yeah, I'll say engagement of audience is around like how do you connect with each other virtually, right? Like there's some here around storytelling, that's some around fundraising and engagement, really, right? Like public engagement of how are you resonating with people, I think is the word that I would use. User experience is like if you've never used Jamboard, or someone right before break said, we usually use Teams versus Zoom. It's a lot more technological, right? So if you're thinking of, if you're in Austin and you've ever gone out anywhere and you've met someone who's like, oh, I'm a UX designer. It's like, think of that really technical phrasing to talk about the experience of using an actual technology platform versus having a connection and having it resonate. So that would be the difference between an engagement of your audience versus like a number of people using the technology.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the themes before we kind of move you into breakouts? I'm gonna frame a little bit about what you're gonna be doing when you move into your breakouts quickly. You're gonna have 15 minutes to kind of discuss 3 questions. So the first is, what about this topic is interesting or challenging for you and your organization? What are some lessons, solutions, or resources that you've used to kind of address this issue? And then what outstanding questions does your group have about the topic? We know that there's a lot of nuances and needs that each group may have. And so there may be things we can't answer today, but understanding what questions you may have will help us connect you with resources moving forward. I'm going to pause real quick to see any other questions about the topics or anything before we move into the breakouts. One thing that I really like as a facilitator in Zoom is that you can do this renaming activity. So if you're facilitating a board or staff and you have different topics, it creates space for folks to kind of choose their own adventure, which I really like when you're facilitating, kind of creates that space.
And I'm adding the questions into the chat as well, so you can have those available for you once you go into your breakout room. And can we also add the Miro board that people can refer to with the sticky groupings? Can somebody add that too?
The Jamboard, sorry.
The Jamboards, yes. Yeah, we're going to break you into your groups shortly. Similar to how we worked on Jamboards before, we're going to have these 3 questions for you to kind of dig into in your Jamboards, depending on your topic. And then one kind of shift in this is that we're going to ask each group to share out. So as you're in your small groups, think about who you might designate to kind of share out the themes or takeaways from your discussion. And with that, Mary, if you're ready, we can move. And if you need a few minutes, that's okay too.
Yeah, 1 second. We have a ton of people who are interested in engagement and audience, so I'm breaking you all up into 5 different sessions. So just 1 minute with that, and then I'll get that Jamboard ready so that people can start rocking out on that. I am going to go ahead and paste the Jamboard link in the chat, and if you want to go ahead and orient yourself there, you're welcome to. And so engagement, you have 5 different breakout rooms. But so you guys can kind of all work on the same Jamboard and just kind of, you can just like move those stickies around, make them nice and small. But that way at least you can facilitate conversation there. And then 1 second, I think I've got 1 straggler remaining, so I'm just gonna plop them in and then we'll be good to go.
And again, if you guys have any issues interacting with the Jamboard, asking questions, feel free to use that help button. We can pop in, Mission Capital can come in and troubleshoot with y'all. So if you're stuck anywhere, holler for us.
All right, we're ready to go. So I'm gonna put you into your rooms and just, yeah, like Chelsea said, let us know if you need help. Almost everyone back now? Looks like we do. So kick it off to you, Min, if you want to just talk about some things people want to share out.
I'm on mute. All right, folks. So thanks so much. I hope you have been able to designate one person from your group to share out something. And you can also change your names back now if you'd like to. Otherwise, I'm just going to start referring to you all for the rest of time as engagement of audience. But do I have any takers to share from their group?
I'll share from ours.
Great, Sarah.
So I think one of the takeaways we came up with is it's nice to have a physical component to your event or your curriculum or something like that. For example, Nicole was it Family and Natures? Is that what it was? Families and Nature? Well, anyway, Jordan, sorry, Jordan.
Yeah, Families and Nature.
Yeah, Families and Nature, they're giving them like supplies or a list of supplies, and then they do like trying to get families into nature, like camping, kayaking, stuff like that. So obviously that's really hard to do remotely, but they're trying to give them like some supplies or a list of stuff to collect so that there's like a physical component to like attach to the virtual. I know for us, we do high school equivalency classes and we've been dropping off materials for students, and that's been helping a little bit with engaging them in their work. So that was something we came up with.
Awesome. And I'll be typing these out and putting them in the chat as I hear them so that everyone has access to those as we go. Who else would like to go?
I can go next. My name is Mary, and I was with the group that was talking about technology access. And so something that I think came across in our time together is that Morgan and Summer were the other two people in my group. And Morgan works with students, and Summer works for the Food Banks of Texas, and I work for Just for Success Austin. So I work with women who are trying to find work. So a lot of it wasn't necessarily that with our coworkers not having technology, but mostly the client base that we work with not having technology, and starting to kind of use Facebook groups and things like that, where you can access people a little better, and reaching out to community partners to find ways to either have donations or school programs that are willing to help with that. But it is a really multifaceted issue when it comes to technology, because it's not just about even having computers and smartphones, it's about having a computer that also has a video on it. It's about also having internet connection, and that is one of the biggest, I think, issues that people are facing right now. And it is, of course, a social economical issue as well, where it is disproportionately having members of the community that already need it help to begin with. So that's kind of what our group talked about, and trying to move forward and helping those people the most. But if I missed anything, Summer and Morgan are great. I would love to have you all jump in if I kind of miss out on anything that we talked about.
I think you got it, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but that was what our group covered.
Good. Thanks, Mary. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go. This is Buck. Our group was talking about collaboration in the virtual environment. So me, Caitlin, and Deb had some great conversations around what we do to maintain the momentum of connectiveness kind of with our kind of coworkers and our partners. And with a couple of great takeaways was that in this virtual environment, everything seems like it's calendared and whatnot. So very important to have more natural conversations, in meetings, have icebreakers, our little games like Rosebud Thorn, what's the best part of your day? What was a pain in the butt? What are you looking forward to? And then also having some time to be off technology. And the last thing we kind of mentioned was to maintain just natural human interaction, instead of having every kind of interaction with a colleague or a partner that's scheduled, be very random about it. So with our organizations, it's randomly calling a coworker, just like you would a friend or a family member, and not have everything on the calendar, or randomly just doing a Zoom call with 2 or 3 people from other departments, just to see if they kind of pick up, just to make it again kind of more natural, experience for interaction.
Thanks so much.
So, because a lot of the things that we talked about, Bob talked about as well. So we were also engagement something, but we were talking about engagement. And so we did talk a lot about Zoom fatigue and some ways to combat Zoom fatigue. And like Buck shared, we talked about stepping away from the computers, but doing walk-in talks. So if your meeting doesn't need you to be in front of a virtual, a video, take the meeting on a phone and then just walk and talk and have the conversation like that. So you're moving your body and you're having your meeting. And then some of the resources that we shared, and by the way, it was Noah, Kristen, Christian on our call. So we talked about Training for Change is an organization that has some really cool Google slide templates for doing some in-person or some virtual engaging activities. We also talked about icebreakers, and some of the things that we talked about was using your physical environment to interact. So Noah talked about how they did an activity called an object as metaphor. So they said, they gave them a prompt, what does power look like for you? Find an object that represents it, and it's just a conversation starter. Or you can do meeting themes, wear your favorite pajamas or wear your favorite sports team. Noah at Creative Action talked about how they did a mid-meeting pause to go do a costume change. And so you start off with one, set of clothes, and then you do your costume change, and then you show back up at the meeting, which I thought was really fun. The other resource we shared was Poll Everywhere. So it's an interactive way to engage audience. So you can do polls, you can do like feeling charts and things like that. And the last thing we shared was, I think I heard someone else, maybe Sarah, share this, is like sending like actual packages to people's homes. So, for example, I believe it was Christian from Live Here, I Give Here. They, instead of them doing their cocktail celebration, they sent cocktails to the supporters' homes. So how fun is that, right? So they repurpose those resources to continue to engage people. Folks, team 2, would y'all add anything to that?
No, it sounded good.
This is my favorite part. These are such great ideas, and these are ideas generated and shared from you all. So this is great because it makes us have to do less, which is the whole point for us. Anybody else want to share the wonderful ideas that came out of your breakout sessions?
Yeah, I can share our very tiny user experience group. We didn't have a ton of kind of solutions. We kind of had more questions than answers after our conversation. And we also had very different experiences with our organizations because we serve different populations. And so some of these issues really came down to knowing what technology people have access to, knowing how they're able to interact with it, serving different populations, age populations, what comfort levels people might have learning new technology, and still doing things maybe by paper right now is difficult. So trying to translate old processes into new ones for folks can be very, very challenging. There's not really a catch-all platform that does everything. And so oftentimes we find ourselves using multiple platforms to try to piece together our programs or whatever it is, fundraisers, things that we're doing, because not one thing does all the things we need. And then just not having a personal connection right now with folks that, it feels like there's the technology wall. We had kind of one idea of, other organizations that are, kind of pioneering and doing some of these, immediately doing their fundraisers virtual or their programs virtual in April and May. How did they do it? What did they learn? And maybe learning from them. One of my issues with our user experience is like, we think that we're giving them all the information they need. We think that we've figured out the process, and somehow there are still major issues coming up with how people they just have questions or confusion, and we don't know where that's coming from because we're like, it's in all these places. We emailed it to you, it's on the website, it's here, it's there. Why is there still an issue? And so we're not even able to find the root of it right now. So just some big questions, and hopefully we can figure out some answers soon. Did I get it for all of my user experience folks? Cool, thanks.
Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left for share outs. Does any other group, I know there are a lot of engagement of audience groups, feel compelled to share, but no pressure?
Yeah, so I think the only thing from our group that kind of hasn't already been talked about is, as far as barriers to engagement, not knowing why the barrier is there, because there's some people that, specifically our group had a lot to do with like students and parents and people in the home, and not knowing if their lack of engagement is because of a technology literacy issue, like not knowing how to access, kind of like what Charlie was talking about already, or if it's because there's kids and dogs in the background and they don't want their house to be seen, or if it's because they don't want to, that they're not engaged in it for more of a personal reason. Because if it's the last one, we can come up with programs, we can come up with ways to get them more engaged, but if it's the first two, we might just need to let it go. And so just our group was trying to figure out, how do we know what that barrier is to their engagement, and then what do we do about it? Otherwise, I think a lot of the engagement stuff that we talked about was pretty much already covered. And then I just want to echo, we also talked about the difficulty of using multiple different platforms to kind of piece together, and having all the staff on board with how those platforms work is really challenging. And then at the user end, having them access it can be confusing. And no matter how clearly you spell it out, it can still be challenging to get everybody on the same page.
Awesome, thanks for that, Leanne. All right, so it's 12:55, so just want to quickly wrap up that you have all this feedback in the chat, but we'll also collect all of this and share back out all of the Jam boards, and we'll be sending out an evaluation as well, so that not all is lost. Once you walk away from the session, you will have more materials and resources. But with that, I'm going to kick it over to Chelsea to wrap us up.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you first to everybody. I know we are in such a dynamic time, and to share 2 hours together is a really special thing. So I want to thank you all for being vulnerable, sharing your perspectives, and sharing these insights. We really see this as an initial gathering of ideas and resources and what's going on. It sounds like there are a couple of themes that might be continuing conversations, and that might be bringing in some other resources and support that maybe we can troubleshoot some specific areas that it sounds like we're having some themes around. I really want to also just name that it looks like there's a really great opportunity for us to do some listening to our audiences and really great connections with the people that we're serving. And so the more we can support that in your efforts, we're really excited to. And on that note, we have an event next week that's looking at one aspect of this, and this was in the breakout room that I joined, but we're having an event in conjunction with DECA, which is the Digital Equity City. Rita, I'm messing it up.
Yeah, the Digital Empowerment Community of Austin.
Thank you. Digital Empowerment Community of Austin, but it's specifically on digital equity and nonprofit needs. So talking about the gaps in service, the gaps in resources and things like that, that you guys are kind of navigating. This is really an event for where we're going to talk about what that looks like and what kinds of resources are available. It'll include some speakers from the city who can talk about what kinds of things you have access to as nonprofits. Some specific funding that might continue afterwards. And then it's really an opportunity for you to share and look at the data that's available and see what kind of data you think is important to make change, to empower you to do the work that you're working to do in the community. So that's next week. It's on Tuesday, and it's another morning session, but we'll send that registration information. We also really stumbled. That's true for everything. We've been stumbling in the dark for many weeks, but we're doing amazing. And so we have some resources, both that you guys shared today and that we would add to the collection, and we'll put those together and share those back out just as next steps, kind of getting specific to some of your areas and resources. Specifically, EdFuel webinar is a great webinar that we ran into and used a lot of some of the orienting from this session for, and then Liberating Structures is another great one that ties nicely to virtual for some of the facilitation prompts and techniques. But we will be sending out an evaluation. We will send out follow-up and next steps, and we really thank you all for joining us today. I feel like this has been our big, it's been nice to spend time with you. I'm really grateful always to hear from you what you're experiencing. And if you have any questions, please continue to reach out. We're here to help and troubleshoot, and thank you all for your time. All right.
Everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Have a great week.